So welcome everyone to our Mixed Methods webinar. The Mixed Methods webinar series mission is to promote an international forum for interdisciplinary mixed methods research, including through regional and international conferences and through web-based materials, webinars, and anticipated in 2020 online modules. So there is a bunch of information that you can see on that opening slide. This slide will be included in the video that will be posted in about a week's time. We have a team that helps us out with that here at the University of Alberta. Again, my name is Juliana Barabbas. I'm with IIQM with the University of Alberta here in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. I'm welcoming to this morning's presentation Lorraine Cook and Vimala Kamalodeen. I'm going to give you some biographical information for these two ladies. Dr. Cook, Lorraine Cook, is a senior lecturer at the School of Education, University of the West Indies, Jamaica. She lectures in research methods and educational psychology. She's the first president of the Mixed Methods International Research Caribbean chapter. Her research interests include evaluating online education in higher education and assisting teachers in improving their teaching skills by investigating ways of aligning the relationships between teachers' intended actions and their actual teaching behaviors. She's the co-editor of the Caribbean Journal of Mixed Methods Research. She's the recipient of Fulbright Visiting Researcher Award and has been a visiting scholar in applied psychology at NYU and the Faculty of Education, Language and Literacy Education at the University of British Columbia, Canada. She's done several workshops and seminars in mixed methods research and has authored and co-authored peer-reviewed book chapters and journal authors, as well as Dr. Vimala Kamalodeen, who is a faculty member of the School of Education, University of the West Indies in Trinidad, West Indies, where she specializes in math and computer science education. She became interested in mixed methods research while doing her doctoral studies at the University of Sheffield in the UK. Her thesis used a complex mixed methods design focusing on hybrid data from an educational online social networking. Vimala is currently engaged in mixed methods research at her institution in game-based learning and successfully hosted the 3rd Regional Mixed Method Conference in the Caribbean earlier this year. Dr. Kamalodeen currently holds the post of President of the Caribbean Chapter of Mixed Methods International Research Association. Vimala and Lorraine, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, thanks to you, Juliana. Thanks to MMIRA. And thanks to IIQM for hosting this webinar and for having us today. Thanks to everyone for joining this webinar. Welcome again to a journey in mixed methods case study research. And just to give you an overview of what to expect in this presentation, in the first half, I will talk about 2 general approaches to mixed methods case study research. We will review the case study, what is a case study research. We will review definition of mixed methods case study research. We will also review core mixed methods research designs, and we will do an overview of the purpose of mixed methods case study research design. In the second half, Dr. Vimala Kamalodeen will discuss 2 examples that utilized mixed methods case study research, and she will summarize and will end the presentation. There is a need for research that captures and provides insights into the complexity of pressing social, economic, and health problems. Both mixed methods research and case study research offer unique methodological advantages for researchers wanting to address these complexities in their various contexts. Case study and mixed methods research are not separate entities, but rather the boundary between them is permeable and fluid, allowing each to either support or lead in a research endeavor. As such, this permeability or fluidity requires an understanding of conducting mixed methods case study research. And going forward, we will refer to mixed methods case study research as MMCSR. According to Creswell and Creswell, there are two general approaches to mixed methods case study research. The first is the deductive approach, where the researcher decides to do case study research at the onset or the initial stages of the study. So at the beginning of the study, the researcher decides, I'm going to be doing case study research, and in that decision, the researcher decides to use Quan and Qual to collect and analyze data and to integrate the results in giving more in-depth insight and understanding into the issue or phenomena that is being investigated. The second approach that Creswell and Creswell put forward is the inductive approach. This occurs where researchers decide from the outset of the study that they will do a mixed methods design. And for example, a researcher might decide to collect quantitative data and analyze to collect and analyze quantitative data first, and to, for example, use extreme sampling or outlier sampling to select a case, or to select 2 or 3 cases to do a multiple case study that will facilitate comparative analysis. The results from this analysis will be integrated to provide more insights and explanation into the quantitative data. So, what is a case study? What is case study research? We are going to be looking, there are several definitions of case study research, and we are going to be looking at two definitions. One by Simons and the other by Creswell, Planer-Clark and Creswell. So definition 1. Case study is an in-depth exploration from multiple perspectives of the complexity and uniqueness of a particular project, policy, institution, program, or system in a real-life context. It is research-based, inclusive of different methods, and is evidence-led. The primary purpose is to generate an in-depth understanding of a specific topic. So please note, when doing a case study, it involves multiple sources for data, which will bring multiple perspectives to the issue. Case studies are also, each case is unique and includes real-life context. So the researcher enters the real-life context of the issue or the phenomena that is being investigated. The second definition, this is by Creswell and Creswell. Case studies are a design inquiry found in many fields, especially evaluation, in which the researchers develop in-depth analysis of the case, often a program, event, activity, process, or one or more individuals. Cases are bounded by time and activity, and researchers collect detailed information using a variety of data collection procedures over a sustained period of time. Please note, one of the critical attributes of a case is that it's bounded by time, activity, or place. In addition, very important, doing a case study research is not a quick fix. It is important for the researcher to be prepared to spend a long time in the field, understanding the case and gaining insights and exploring deeper and deeper into getting an overarching picture of the case. So very important elements or attributes of case studies are as follows. In-depth study, it requires time and effort from the researcher. A case is bounded. The researcher, it's very important for researchers to put an edge around the case, put limits around the case. And case studies involve multiple sources, and through multiple sources, the researcher is able to get multiple perspectives. Case study also occur within the real-life context. And finally, case studies each case is unique. So it's important for researchers to think about the attributes, general attributes, and the critical attributes. Critical attributes of a case is that the case is bounded, it occurs in real-life context. The critical attributes sets the case study research apart from other research approaches. Now we come to purpose for using case study, and sometimes authors refer to the purpose for using case study as types of case study. We have the explanatory case study, the exploratory case study, descriptive case study, instrumental case study, and intrinsic case study. We will now go a little more in depth in these various types or purpose for doing case study. So the first, explanatory case study. An explanatory case study explains a phenomena, and this explanation may be context specific. So the researcher, in going into the situation, acknowledges that the case is multifaceted. If the case is multifaceted, then it means that the researcher will have to plan to collect data from different sources within the case. So the researcher will be collecting bits of information from various sources. The explanation will be based on the interrelations between these bits of information. So the explanatory case study explains how and why some sequence of events happen. Now we come to the exploratory case study. An exploratory case study might be effective when you are investigating a problem that has not been studied. So according to Yen, an exploratory case study is to identify the research questions or procedures to be used in a subsequent study which might or might not be a case study. So when we are exploring, when we are going into a situation that not much research has been done, if any at all, we first will do observations and informal discussions. At the end of this period, the researcher then may decide to not do a case study. The researcher may decide to do a survey instead. Or the researcher may decide, well, a case study research may be the best approach to understanding and gaining insights into the issue or phenomenon. Now we come to descriptive case study. Descriptive case study, the purpose is to describe a phenomena in its real-world context. And now the instrumental case. The instrumental case is is that case is used when the case is a tool. So the case is of secondary interest to the researcher. It plays a supportive role to facilitate understanding something else. And you will see this in some of the mixed methods research design, where you start off with quantitative and then you go qualitative, use qualitative to gain more insights into the quantity. And a case or cases can be used in an instrumental way to give more understanding. And finally, the intrinsic case study. This case study is not a means to an end as the instrumental, but instead we study the case because we are interested in understanding this specific case. In other words, the case itself is of interest to the researcher. And now we will explore there are several definitions of mixed methods case study research, but we have selected to look closer at Plano-Clark, Cresswell and Plano-Clark's definition. So a mixed methods case study design is a type of mixed methods study in which quantitative and qualitative data collection, results, and integration are used to provide in-depth evidence for a case or develop cases for comparative analysis. So it's very important that within a mixed methods case study research, there are quantitative and qualitative data collection and analysis, and that integration takes place between these two data. Now we come to the core designs of mixed methods research. We have the explanatory sequential, the exploratory sequential, and the concurrent design. The explanatory sequential has two main phases. The first phase, the design starts with the collection and analysis of quantitative data. The first phase is followed by collecting and analyzing qualitative data in order to explain or expand on the quantitative. And integration takes place, two main stages of this design. You have integration to the sampling frame, where a subsample of participants are selected from the larger quantitative sample to participate in the phase 2 of the study. Integration also takes place at the inferential level, where the researcher draws upon the results of the quantitative and show the audience how the qualitative has expanded or given more insights into the quantitative. Now we come to the exploratory sequential design. In contrast to the explanatory design, the exploratory sequential design begins with qualitative. Building from the qualitative results, the researcher can develop instruments, they can develop interventions, apps, or websites. Once these are developed, it's piloted, and then it's applied to a larger sample. And again, it could be quantitative. Once you develop the instrument, then you would decide on your sample size, decide on your sampling technique, and then you would administer the instrument in a survey. Or you could develop case studies from once Once you have administered the instrument, you could go further and collect data that will allow qualitative data that will allow an explanation of the quantity. So it could extend into a multi-stage design. Now we come to the convergent design. This design is used when the researcher wants to compare quantitative statistical results with qualitative findings for a complete understanding of the research problem. This convergent design is sometimes referred to as concurrent design. The researcher first collects both quantitative and qualitative data about the topic of interest. The data collection are concurrent and typically they are analyzed separately. Then the results are compared to ascertain convergence and divergence between the two data sets. These core designs can be used within the framework of a single or multiple case study. Now I'll invite Dr. Kamalodeen to continue with the discussion by using examples that will give more insight into how the designs are integrated into case study. She will also be will be illustrating the difference between inductive and the deductive approach. Over to you, Dr. Kamalodeen.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cook, for taking us through the concepts and ideas of mixed methods case study design. And in particular, participants, I am very happy to be with you this morning. I realize that we're all over the world, and I thank Juliana for hosting us so beautifully thus far. The two examples that we have chosen were among several that we read thoroughly, but which we felt would illustrate the two different approaches that Dr. Cook already spoke about. One was the deductive approach, and one was the inductive approach to mixed methods case study research. In this first example, game-based learning in STEM primary classrooms, a mixed methods case study in Trinidad, West Indies, and you can see it's a collaborative project led by myself here with many other team members from the School of Education at the University of West Indies in Trinidad. At the outset, we decided on a pilot study. This therefore was a case study, as the case explored game-based learning approaches in STEM classrooms in one primary school in Trinidad. And the purpose was to provide methodological and procedural insights for the use of games in math and science classrooms. The reason why we say this is an instrumental study is that the case was an instrument or tool to explore game-based learning and to further our understandings for implementation in a larger study of game-based learning in primary STEM classrooms. We consider game-based learning to be complex. Why? Games have been known since forever to bring fun into the classrooms, and teachers and students have used it alike. But there's divided research about the link of using games to actually improving performance in the classroom, in particular in mathematics and science. And mathematics and science needs quite a bit of attention because there seems to be quite a bit of anxiety among students and even teachers with math and science, and especially with testing. So for our nations to grow, we want to promote science and math performance. We want to improve learning in science in STEM classrooms, and we hypothesize that games or game-based learning can be used to have positive learning outcomes in STEM classrooms. We decided to use a deductive approach. Again, we're repeating this word deductive as opposed to inductive approach to mixed methods case study research, which was one of the two approaches that Creswell and Creswell have already outlined. We decided on the case study at the beginning, and then within the case to employ a mixed methods design to collect, analyze, and interpret data. As such, this shows you how we, instead of just doing a qualitative case, we are talking about using mixed methods in the case, which is what makes it quite different. Creswell and Poth 2018, which Dr. Cook already spoke about, talked about the ways you can bind a case. And in this case, Creswell spoke about a prolonged period in the place of study, and we spent 1 year in the primary school that we selected purposefully. And the school pretty much was one that agreed to us coming in and having the researchers come in to do this game-based research. It was also very close to the university, and as such, all the elements of having critical friends and gaining access to the field were things that we considered when we were selecting the particular school. But remember, the central issue is not the school, but game-based learning in the STEM primary classroom. And the school was selected only for facilitate the studying of this particular issue. So what was the design? Well, the design was also what Creswell calls complex. It is not one of the 3 core designs that Dr. Cook has spoken about earlier. It is actually an experimental or intervention design. And we looked at the design in 3 selected levels of primary classrooms in the school. That would be, in the Caribbean we call that infant, standard 3 and standard 5, but I believe it would be equivalent to kindergarten, grade 3, and grade 5 internationally. And the intent was that we would collect data and analyze before, during, and after the intervention, and that the qualitative data would add to the experimental data to provide a contextual and holistic understanding of game-based learning. A little bit about the primary school is that it is a small co-educational school of 200 students and 20 teachers, and the school was also chosen because it represents the mixed racial and religious demographics of Trinidad. The 3 levels were strategically selected, and the teachers and students of those classrooms in math and science were the participants in the study. This diagram is one that we designed hoping that you would understand the mixed methods case study design a lot better. What we have at the outset is the case, and the case we use the oval to represent it being bound, a bounded case by the time and the central issue of central concern, game-based learning. Within the case, we applied an intervention, which was actually the games. It's not one game, there are actually several games. And we collected quantitative data, and what you would expect, student pre-test and afterwards student post-test. We also gave teachers a questionnaire with closed and open responses. At the end of the intervention period, we interviewed the teachers. During the intervention, which took place in each case over a week, even though we had been at the school over a period of a year, it was aligned to a particular curriculum bits. In the case of mathematics, it was aligned to geometry, and in the case of science, it was aligned to evolution. And we looked at timing it so that nothing would disrupt this normal school flow and their curriculum, so we looked at so that's why we looked at the alignment. So during the intervention, we collected qualitative data, which is through classroom observation, and as I said, there were several classrooms, and students used a rating scale, which was particularly designed for younger children, and that contained using emoticons to rate the games as they played it, and they also wrote how they felt about the games. So, as we have seen already about a case study, is that there will be multiple data collection from multiple sources in order to gain a more complete understanding and holistic understanding of game-based learning. How did we rationalize the mixed methods design? Through two ways. One, compare and contrast. We looked at data which we would use to compare and see whether they would be the same, and data if there would be any contrasting data. So for the test data, we had student data, we had teacher data, and of course the classroom observation. And the purpose here was so that we could understand the context of the classroom, the students, the teachers, and the games themselves. We wanted to improve the fidelity of the implementation procedures and explain observations of what worked and what didn't. According to Green, Caroselli, and Graham, 1989, complementarity is a rationale for using mixed methods. And in this case, we wanted to complement test data with other types of data. So we actually gave students, as I talked about, the student game ratings, and these data were to help improve understanding of how participants were experiencing the games, identify issues and resources in implementation of the games, and to make connections within the STEM classroom. So rationalization of the mixed methods is important when you're doing any mixed methods case study research. Here I outline some strengths and to be followed by some challenges that we experienced in this design. Well, I already spoke that we felt that game-based learning was a complex issue and required therefore a complex design and another approach as opposed to a singular approach or traditional approach in order to understand it. As such, we brought together the design of case study and mixed methods. This design also allowed multiple researchers, and as you saw in the beginning slide, there are several of us, multiple researchers to gather data in the case at different times and even in different classrooms. It allowed different research questions to be addressed. In this study, there was a quantitative question, a qualitative question, and a mixed question. And this particular design was quite appealing to the funding agency, who thought that this was quite an original design. And this project is in fact a UE grant-funded project. But did we experience challenges? Yes, we did, and we continue to do so as this project still continues. First of all, when you have collaborative research team, while different researchers have different ranges of expertise, and therefore we needed to draw on the expertise of each other in order to make everything work. There were also differences in understandings and different ways of approaching, and even within the areas of STEM, which is science and math, there were differences. This study was time-consuming. There were multiple entries to the classroom, and therefore, and with different teachers and different classrooms, which then impacts the completeness of data collection. In some case, we had to go and make return journeys just to get all the data that we required. Complex designs require much effort to design and to implement. So this is a particularly important point. We don't want you to go away thinking that any of this is just easy. That is why I believe Creswell talks about 3 core designs: And then he goes on to talk about more complex designs. And other authors such as Sherrod Park and so on talk about adaptable designs as you adapt it to your particular study. And if you are doing something that is fairly new, it takes much effort. And there are the usual tensions of combining a qualitative case design with mixed methods experimental design, which we had to resolve. So what were the results? Well, the quantitative result. There was a statistically significant increase in student attainment in math and science. So hooray! So that's great. However, the difference was marginal. We used t-tests, paired t-tests, to generate this result. So let's see what the qualitative outcomes helped us to understand. Well, I've separately presented by students and teachers. Responses from students, both orally and written, revealed inconsistency in conceptual understandings of math and science. Students enjoyed the games and rated them as fun, but challenging. So these were two words that kept recurring when we were doing the thematic analysis of what they wrote and what they said. Game design and mechanics, we found out, were very important for appeal to the students. We also found out that younger students, that one in the kindergarten level, benefited much less from the game-based learning and needed a lot of help from teachers in order to play the games. What did we find out from the teachers? Well, teachers felt that the games were useful in the classroom, so that was positive. And they felt students were engaged in learning math and science. They also felt learning was in fact achieved in math and science in those areas using games. But what we found out was that teachers require a lot of professional development and support to implement game-based learning in their classrooms. So overall, what is it that we found? What were the integrated findings and inferences that we made? Okay. From the qualitative data, we found assertions related to engagement, quality of learning, and social interaction. And we found that the games engaged students, promoted learning of math and science, but that the games were sometimes too challenging, but they did allow for social interaction. Consistent findings were that there were positive learning outcomes and the games were fun. Complementary findings were that the teachers required professional development to design and implement game-based learning in their classrooms, even though they had favorable perspectives to it. Young students respond less favorably to game-based learning, and that students were highly engaged. Some divergent findings were that teachers felt the games were suited to students' level, but the students felt that the games were too challenging or overly complex. Students' scores were sometimes different, leading to conclusions that there were gaps in conceptual understandings, and game design, mechanics, and aesthetics are important to increase game appeal. So student age, teacher professional development, game aesthetics, and level of challenge are important factors in implementing game-based learning. And we inferred that positive student learning outcomes and favorable perspectives to game-based learning were found in STEM primary classrooms. So we move on now to our second example. And this example illustrates the inductive approach that, as I said, Dr. Cook spoke about earlier in this presentation. This example is students' persistence in a distributed doctoral program in educational leadership in higher education, a mixed method study that has been published since 2007. The researchers are Natalia Ivankova and Sheldon Stick. The purpose of this study was to identify factors contributing to students' perseverance in the University of Nebraska-Lincoln Distributed Doctoral Program in Educational Leadership in Higher Education. The design. Ivankova and Stick decided on a mixed methods design at the outset, and their design was one of the three core designs that Dr. Cook spoke about: explanatory, sequential. The research questions in the quantitative phase focused on variables, internal and external, to the program. And the research questions dealt with the degree to which certain independent variables predict students' persistence in the program. The qualitative phase aimed to explore the results from the statistical analysis using 4 case studies from distinct participant groups. What was the rationale for the mixed methods study? Well, mixed methods was necessary because the researchers felt that either quant or the qual only was not sufficient to capture these complex situations that contributed to doctoral students' perseverance in their study. Also, data collected using the 2 research approaches provided a more complete picture of the research issue. Again, the research issue was students' perseverance in the doctoral program. This particular figure 1, was taken from Ivankova and Stick's publication, and it is not meant for you to actually read it, but I will highlight some parts of it because we felt the diagram was important. This diagram is a visual model for mixed method sequential explanatory design, illustrating the procedural tasks that the researchers took on throughout the study. I will explain just a bit for you. The first phase was a quantitative data collection. So I'm just going to highlight that here, even though you may not be able to see it all well. I'm highlighting it, so I'll speak to it. So this is a quantitative data collection. Yes, Natalia, thank you. Thank you for noting that as well. We are really happy to choose your example for illustration. And the detail is given here in that it was a cross-sectional web-based survey of 278 participants. There was a data screening and factor analysis and a number of analytic techniques in the quantitative data phase and analysis phase. From this phase, 4 cases were selected. Let me repeat that. From the survey, 4 cases were selected. So the qualitative data collection was individual in-depth telephone interviews with 4 participants, email follow-up interviews, elicitation materials, documents, Lotus Notes courses. Some of the data analyses were coding and thematic analysis, within case and across case development, cross-thematic analysis, and leading to integration, interpretation, and explanation of the quantitative and the qualitative results. You can see more of that. It's published already, so you can always check that out a little bit later on. So we wanted to delve a bit more into how Ivankova and Stick selected the cases. Well, in reality, even though they did a number of participants, 207 participants actually took part in this study. And these participants were divided into 4 groups. So let's see what those 4 groups are. Beginning group, matriculated group, graduated group, and withdrawn group. The beginning group, students completed 30 or fewer credit hours of the course, N was 78. The second group, matriculated students, completed more than 30 credit hours of coursework, N is 78. Group 3, the graduated group, former students who had graduated from the program with a doctoral degree, N was 26. And Group 4, withdrawn or inactive, former students who had either withdrawn or been terminated from the program or been inactive during the last 3 terms before the survey was administered. N was 25. We drew this diagram so that we hope that you will get a better idea of how 4 cases were selected after the quantitative survey was completed and factor analysis was done. Case selection involved 2 stages according to Ivankova and Stick. During the first phase, typical respondents in each participant group were identified first by calculating summed mean scores and their respective group mean scores for all participants. This was followed by selecting those participants whose mean score was within 1 standard error of the mean. In the second stage, maximum variation strategy was used to select the best informant within each group, and the process produced 1 male and 3 females, leading to case 1, case 2, case 3, case 4 of 4 persons. So, what was the design? Well, again, the design therefore was a multiple case study design. Each case was selected as a tool to illuminate a particular issue. We took that in quotation, page 101 from the publication. The case studies were instrumental. How were they bound? Each case study was bounded by an individual, and by the time he or she matriculated in the program, if we go back again to this screen, you would see beginning, matriculated, graduated, withdrawn. And I already spoke about how the cases were selected. So, what were the findings? Well, 9 predictors were found from the quantitative stage: program, online learning environment, faculty, self-motivation, student support services, employment, vital community, academic advisor, and family. And from the qualitative findings, 4 themes related to the cases emerged: quality of academic experiences, online learning environment, support and assistance, and self-motivation. In spite of being common for all participants, those themes differed in the number and similarity of sub-themes and categories comprising them. So, in conclusion, the quantitative phase identified 5 factors that were identified to contribute to students' persistence in the program. These factors were internal and external to the program. However, the qualitative analysis revealed 4 factors that were critical: quality of the program and other related academic experiences, the very nature of the online learning environment, support and assistance from different sources, and student self-motivation. And as such, we remind you that Ivankova and Stick used an inductive approach to mixed methods case study research. So as we begin to close, let's look at these 2 studies again. One example by myself and my team used the mixed methods case study approach was deductive. The purpose of the case study was instrumental. The case was instrumental to understanding game-based learning in primary STEM classrooms for the purpose of implementing in a larger study of primary schools. The design was an intervention or experimental design where games were actually used in the classroom. The original case was intentional, it was selective, it was purposive, it was purposefully chosen. The participants were students and teachers in the one primary school. For the second example, Ivankova and Stick, the mixed methods case study approach used was inductive. They started off with a mixed methods design, sequential, explanatory, and then case study was instrumental. 4 cases were selected, multi-case. They used typical and maximum variation strategies to select the case, and the participants were doctoral students in educational leadership at the university. We do hope that these 2 examples have illuminated for you the differences in the 2 approaches of deductive and inductive, and showed how 2 different groups of researchers in 2 different parts of the world were using mixed methods case study research in their particular studies. And we hope that this would lead you to asking us questions that we can answer. Thank you very much, and I hand you over to Juliana.
Thank you both so much. Can everyone hear me? If I can see some yeses in the chat window, that would be lovely. I see some yeses. Wonderful. So if you'd like to type your questions in now at this time, I can read them off, and we'll take the questions as they come into chat. And just while we're waiting on that, I'll let you all know that there will be a video as well as the slide deck that will be posted on the IIQM webinar section of our website in about a week's time. So you can see the full presentation. If for those of you that signed on a bit later, the full presentation will be available in about a week. Okay, any questions out there? If you want to use your chat window, we are eagerly awaiting. I'll also note while people are formulating their questions that we do have another webinar coming up on October 16th, also at 9 a.m. Mountain Time. That is Cheryl Poth, Elizabeth Creamer, Kathy Collins, talking about teaching mixed methods research.
Oh, Ingrid is there.
And Lorraine and Vimali, do you have any upcoming projects that you would like to mention at this time as well? Oh, I see someone. Valerie is typing a question. Actually, we've got Keith King. Keith is asking, can you talk a bit more about the decision to use a case study for exploratory research? As a PhD student, I'm interested in exploratory designs in MMR. That was Keith King.
Okay.
Lorraine or Vimala?
Yeah, I was just, I think I could try, and then Vimala could probably or support. Can you talk a bit more about the decision to use a case study for exploratory research? So, exploratory research in the sense that there are 2 ways to use it. One is that you are not familiar with the situation or the phenomena, and so you will go into the situation or phenomena and do some informal observations and some informal talks. Haven't gotten some of those, haven't gotten the information, then you go back to your drawing board and you plan what your purpose will be and what your research question. That's one way to look at it. The other way is that you may decide that you may want to develop intervention or a questionnaire, and so you will go into the situation, interview persons, talk to persons, and based on the factors that are the themes that emerge from your analysis, then you use those themes, convert them into variables, and design a questionnaire, or you design your intervention. I don't know if Vimala would like to expand on that.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. I'm just going to go back to that slide which talked about I believe it's exploratory. Keith is asking for the exploratory research. Now, you would notice that the example that we selected was sequential explanatory, and we actually found that to be much more popular in the literature as an approach rather than the exploratory, which seemed to be maybe a little bit more complex. But based on the diagram here, and this is again one of the core designs, is that you start off with the qualitative data because you really don't know much about what it is you're investigating. And then you expand. This is connected to unbuilt, which means building out into something that you're going to develop. For example, as Dr. Cook said, an instrument or an intervention which will then be applied. So the actual example in the case study, perhaps at the outset here, you may decide to do, if you decide there are two approaches again, as we spoke about. One is the inductive approach and one is the deductive approach. Keith, you would have to decide how you are managing that decision, how it is you're going to choose which approach you're going to use, because depending on the approach affects the mixed methods design as well. So are you going to start off mixed methods, for example, and then have cases? Or are you going, which doesn't seem to line up very well with this particular design, or are you going to start off with a case and perhaps here at this point, this you may use this part, the qualitative part, to be the case study and to give you some better idea about what your case is before you develop the instrument and look to connect from your results from your qualitative into your survey instrument or your quantitative measure later on. So the deciding on the approach, whether it is inductive or deductive, I think is critical when you're looking at mixed methods, case study research.
Wonderful. Thank you both. We have another couple of questions. I suspect that let's see, let's take Valerie's question first. Is it possible to talk a bit more about the integration of qualitative and quantitative results? And I'm just going to note that if we do not get through all the questions, Vimala and Lorraine, would you be comfortable if I sent these questions to you and perhaps we can include a couple of comments in the slides that get put up in about a week's time? Would that be okay?
Yeah. Yes, that will be okay.
Okay, so to Valerie's question then, is it possible to talk a bit more about the integration of qualitative and quantitative results?
Okay. Okay. There are various ways to integrate your quantitative and qualitative results, and I believe the webinar before this webinar and joint display would be really good to listen to, which I think Tim Gutterman was the presenter, and
That's correct.
In that webinar he spoke about joint display, how to integrate, how to display your quantitative along with your qualitative so that the audience is able to see the comparison between the both, and then how to use those joint display to make an integrated inference about the results from the quan and the qual. That's one way. Another way is data transformation, where you can quantize the qualitative themes. You know, you use frequency of occurrence of the different themes, and then you could probably present those themes on a bar chart. There are statisticians who have used mixed methods and have taken it to a very complex level where they have quantized the qualitative and use chi-square, for example. So there are various ways, but I think the Tim Gutterman webinar on joint display would really be good, Valerie, for you to probably look at.
Wonderful.
Just in closing, I just want to say yes, that integration of mixed methods, that is where a lot of work an understanding has to take place. And but again, a joint display has been recommended highly to really show both quant and qual results. And the webinar that Tim Guterman did earlier was really helpful in that regard, plus several other texts that are illustrating more joint displays and other ways of demonstrating how data can be integrated. So some more work to be done there.
Thank you both so much for this wonderful presentation. We've had a number of people in the chat window thanking for how informative it was. We do have a few questions from Mohammed and from Sui, and I will be sending these to you from our chat window afterwards. So for all of you who are looking for a copy of the presentation, again, the video and the slide deck will be available as a PDF, the video as an online link to our YouTube channel. That'll be in about a week's time. So thank you again to MMIRA for their ongoing sponsorship of this series, and to both of you, Lorraine and Vamali, for this wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Wonderful. Good day, everyone.